So the subtitle of my message this morning would be like, what does it take to be rich? What is this currency that's like the better version, and what does it take to be rich? And when we start off thinking about this, in our context today, in today's day and age, people think about what it takes to be rich, and they go to things like, hey, if I'm a great investor, I could be rich. And you think back to the early days and you're like, if I had just bought that stock early enough, right, then I would just be like doing so well. Like if you went back to the early days and on LinkedIn and Twitter and all these places, like I kind of follow a bunch of people and they have these like pictures of like Jeff Bezos when he was like just starting Amazon. And it was funny, he actually posted like a video of the original Amazon website. And it was obviously just a bookstore at that time. And if you saw the website, you would be like, doesn't even deserve to be like a company in today's day and age. But back then it was like very basic, nothing, no fanfare, no frills. And if you were smart enough at that time to understand the big picture, and you put a little bit of money into Amazon, you might be doing really well today. And so some people say, hey, it's the investing that you got to get right. You got to make sure you put a little money in the right place. Or maybe it's the cryptocurrencies, right? You're like, everybody's hearing about Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and all these things, and you're like, what if I bought just a little bit of BTC? Would that make me rich? And then some people might even say, hey, forget about all of that investing stuff in the markets. I don't believe in the markets. I don't believe in stocks. And you might say, hey, just buy real estate. If you just buy real estate, you'll be golden. And if you were smart enough in like 10 years ago to go somewhere in the outskirts of like, the city and buy a big house, today you might be doing really well. And you might say, that's a great way to get rich. Just buy tons of real estate. Forget about the market. Just buy house after house after house. And some of you are like, have you seen the inflation rates lately? That's a bad idea. Why invest in real estate? Your interest payments are going to go up. You won't be able to handle it. Real estate's a bad idea. And so some of you might say, forget about that. It's actually saving that's going to make you rich, right? Don't worry about investing at all. Just every penny you make, spend as little of it as possible, find a nice savings account, and drop every penny into that savings account. And one day you will be rich. You will have made it. And all of these things are super interesting things. And you might do these things, and one day you'll retire, and you'll end up in the beaches. And every morning you'll wake up in your mansion and look out the window and see the water and feel really good about yourself and pat yourself on the back. And that might happen. But what I think you'll get out of that is realize that you're not really rich. What I think you'll come away with is like, that's not the be-all and end-all and the most important thing in life. That's not the real currency that matters. You see, currency matters. Currency is super important. And I'll tell you why. If you had $100 US and you showed up in Cuba or some part of the developing world, people would be like, yeah, give me the 100 USD. I'll take the 100 USD, please. But at the same time, if you took like a Mexican peso as an example, and you showed up in Japan and you said, I got 100 Mexican pesos, can I buy that the sushi right there? I guarantee you somebody be like, can you transfer that into a USD or yen, maybe? And this kind of gives you this understanding that the currency you operate on matters. If you're a believer in kind of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, you could have a ton of it. And some people will love you and say, give me all of it that you can. And some people will be like, I don't believe that, it's going to zero. And so the currency you operate on has a lot of impact to what you can do and how you live and all of those things. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is this idea that to be rich, to be really rich, we need to think about life in terms of a new currency, a different kind of currency. And the Bible kind of talks about this in greater detail, in deeper ways. And so, Vid, if you don't mind, if you can put the first verse up, it'd be great. In Matthew chapter 19, Jesus is talking to this young man. The Bible says he's a young ruler. It's kind of interesting, this young ruler, because the young ruler had a conscience. You know, anybody who's made it big by the time they're like 25, which this guy sounds like he was. I don't know his exact age, but you know, he definitely wasn't in his like midlife or later life. He was young. And that probably means like he had well-to-do parents, grew up in a good spot, was like set. And with all of that, he kind of realized, hey, life is more than all this stuff I have. It means like there's more to this. And so he finds Jesus. He like goes out of his way to find Jesus because he realizes he's missing something. But isn't that interesting in and of itself? It's like you could have all the money in the world and still not be rich. You could have everything. You could have, you know, the cars, the house, the beach view, the company, the prestige, the people who applaud everything you do, and still be missing something. And so this rich young ruler finds Jesus, and he says, he asked actually even a better question than what does it mean to be rich? He said, what does it mean to have eternal life? Like, how do I experience this thing that you've been talking about? I've kind of been hearing it. You're a thought leader. You're a revolutionary. You're somebody who thinks about things differently. You have broader perspective. What does it mean to actually see those things come to pass? And him and Jesus go back and forth. And Jesus actually says to him, like, hey, these are a few things you need to do. But Jesus tells him a bunch of things to do. But it gets really interesting in the middle of their conversation. And in the middle of the conversation is where we kind of pick it up. It says, you know, I've obeyed all these commandments. This is the rich young ruler talking. He's like, I've obeyed all of these things that you've talked about. What else? What else? What's the big picture? And then if we can go to verse 21. It says, Jesus told him, if you want to be perfect, go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come follow me. I'll pause there for a sec, because this is, maybe many of us in the room have heard this before. We've read this before. We've been taught in Sunday school these things before. But I wanted to sit for a second, because what Jesus was saying is, hey, if you want to be on the right track, you kind of have to understand where your bank account is. This is kind of important. How many people bank with the big five? But the truth is that where your bank account is matters a lot. You know, there's a reason, and we've all seen movies and whatever. There's a reason why, you know, you get to a certain income level and you start transferring some of your money over to Switzerland or the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas or something like that. Because, you know, where your money is kind of matters, because there's a whole bunch of implications around it. And what Jesus was sort of saying to this rich young ruler, what he was saying is, hey man, I think you got the wrong perspective on where your bank account actually is. You know, if you want a truth bomb, this is the truth bomb. It's this understanding, is that being rich doesn't equal having many numbers or many digits in your Scotiabank account. Being rich doesn't mean, you got a ton of Bitcoin. Being rich doesn't mean that, you have financial resources, in a cold storage wallet in your house. That's not what it means. Being rich is what Jesus was talking about, is saying, hey, you will have treasure in heaven. And I want to pause on that for a second. Because when you think about your bank account here on earth, it's temporary. you never get this perspective as much as when, a loved one passes away or a friend or someone passes away, because what you realize is the money doesn't go with you. It can't go with you. It's temporary. And even worse, like, you realize it even more with like cryptocurrencies, because your entire cryptocurrency kind of like account is tied to a string of numbers and letters. It's like an ID. It's like a wallet address. And if you mistake for a second one of those IDs, or you lose the ID, or you kind of like put it away and your computer gets corrupted, all of the numbers disappear. More and more, the world is going digital, right? So like, we use cash nowadays, and so if you show up at like a good restaurant, like Lucky's, and you're like, hey, can I buy something? And they're like, do you have cash? And you're like, yeah, nobody carries cash, buddy. Can I tap? But really, if you go to China as an example, you'll never get that question, because even merchants on the street have like Alipay, and kind of like Tencent has another payment app, and you just tap. And you're just tapping or scanning QR codes. And the way our kind of money system is moving is that everything is becoming digitized. And then can you imagine, one of like a doomsday scenario where someone sends a bug through one of these companies, and the dollars in your account just kind of like disappear? I mean, we talk about it and we don't believe it, but then we didn't believe COVID either. And in reality is that like these things can happen, and they're really temporary. But what Jesus was saying was, where your bank account really is, your bank account really is in heaven. Your treasure really is in heaven. There's really a spot where you can make deposits into this bank account here and now. That's a pretty important perspective. The important perspective is that you can start making eternal deposits in the here and now. You can start accumulating wealth, real wealth, in the here and now. You can start accumulating God-given wealth that's never going to get eroded by how you live here on earth. The Bible has a really cool verse. It's Matthew 6:19. What it says is, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. The Bible gives you this excellent perspective that what we have here on earth is temporary, but what we give and how we live and all of those things store up eternal treasure for us in heaven. And the way that we make these deposits, right? Like when you're going through life and you're thinking about, hey, I gotta like make a payment, or I have to kind of like save. I don't know how many of you are gonna make like contributions this year, but when you're giving, what you're doing is you're actually increasing or debiting your account to kind of go up. And the way you do that is you either get paid or someone gives you money, and you physically go to the bank and you say, here's some more, right? Put it into my account. But what the Bible says, and it's really interesting, is that the way you increase your bank account in heaven, the way you increase the treasures of heaven, is the exact opposite as how we increase our bank account here on earth. It's almost like training wheels, right? When you're riding a bike, the first thing that you learn to do when you ride a bike is you put on training wheels and you start pedaling. And we've been taught our whole life how to be successful in life. And the way that we've been taught to be successful in life is to see our bank account number go up. The higher the bank account number, the better we're doing in life. If you had to have a scorecard of your life, right? And you just put the scorecard down, it's like, how good am I doing objectively to anybody who's watching? One of the measures on that scorecard would be what's my income? What's my net income? And we hear about people like Bezos and Musk and Buffett, and the list goes on, and people are like, they're doing amazing in life because their income is X. And the big shift in perspective is that the way you increase your scorecard in heaven is to do the exact opposite of what makes you successful here on earth. And therein lies the tension. This is the forever tension that you'll have from this moment to the day you die. Which bank account are you optimizing? Are you optimizing the here and now, or are you optimizing the forever? That is the hardest question that you will have to live with. Because the more you increase this bank account, the less you make deposits in that one. And the only way to make a deposit in this one is to give away. It's almost like you need to start with training wheels again and relearn and reteach and rewire your brain to think with a different perspective. And this is exactly what Jesus said. He says, if you want to be perfect, go and sell all of your possessions and give the money to the poor. Then you'll make a huge deposit in your heavenly bank account, and then come and follow me. If you read verse 22. But when the young man heard this, he went away sad, because he had many possessions. This is where it gets really tricky, right? It gets really tricky because if you think about the young man, remember we said he had a conscience? He seemed like a good guy. He was one of those guys who said, I did everything you said on the list. Check, 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 check. But this one thing was what he couldn't get over. This one thing was the thing that he just couldn't get past, and he walked away. He's like, that's just the one thing I can't give up. It was the straw that broke the camel's back for him. And then Jesus, kind of at the end of this chapter in Matthew, says something pretty profound. He says, but many who are the greatest now will be least important then, and those who seem to be least important now will be the greatest then. And if you read Matthew, the book of Matthew, and you read like from chapter 5 to probably chapter 22 or 23, there's a great chunk of stuff in that block. And in that block, you see a theme. And one of the kind of core themes is Jesus dropping wisdom, but he's in particular dropping wisdom about this. What he over and over and over again says in different types of ways is this concept. And the concept he gives is simply this. The concept he says is, you choose for yourself. Do you want to be important now, or do you want to be important later? Do you want to be first now, or do you want to be first later? And really the thing that we think through all the time is like, how do I be the best now? How do I get the highest kind of follower count? How do I make the most money? How do I be the best in my field? How do I be the smartest? How do I be the best looking? How do I be the most fit? How do I have the best car? How do I have the best house? How do I have the best? And that's how we kind of optimize our lives. But what Jesus is actually saying is a little bit different. He says, how do you serve the most now? How do you give the most now? How do you empower the most now? How do you bless the most now? How do you lift up the most now? How do you encourage the most now? How do you serve the most now? What will you give now? And that's the foundation for what will greatness be later. It's actually like an empirical fact that the best leaders are the ones who serve the most. And so this idea is not like without merit or without benefit. It's built in truth. It's that to be someone great, we need to give the most. And so this new currency, this new way to live, this new perspective, it starts with this understanding that what we have today is a mechanism or a tool for setting up our lives to a greater future. And you know what Jesus was a master of? Jesus was a master of giving you the bigger picture. We oftentimes look at our lives in too narrow a scope. You know, if you lived your whole life with the perspective that 2020 was all there was to live, you would have made the wrong decisions in life. If 2020 was all that life was going to be, and you made every decision, your investment decisions, your life partner decisions, your purchase decisions, your family decisions, if you made all of those decisions based on 2020 alone, you probably would have made a bunch of bad decisions. But now can you imagine if you were sitting 50 years from now and looking back at your life and you could make decisions with that perspective? How different would you make those decisions? And this is exactly what Jesus was trying to say to the young rich ruler. And what he's saying to us today is that if you optimize your life for today, you will make the wrong decisions. But if you understand that eternity is the perspective, then the way that you think about life is different. We have too narrow a perspective. I'm always reminded of this when I think about the universe. We think that Toronto or Markham or Brampton or Pickering or Mississauga or Oakville, we think that's the universe. That's our universe, right? The pharmacy, the Shoppers Drug Mart, the gym, the hospital, the park. That's the universe that we live in. That's everything. The person in my school or at my workplace, that's my universe. But we forget that the universe is infinitely vast, and that even the earth is just a speck or a golf ball in the grand scheme of everything that exists. And what Jesus was speaking to the rich young ruler in that moment is, hey man, you've got the wrong perspective. The few dollars that you have here don't matter because I've got the universe. And in the universe, the only category or currency that matters is the treasures you store up in heaven. And that's what's going to make you wealthy. That's what's going to make you great. And if you make the right decisions, you'll get there. But it's almost like this rich young ruler is like, my city's the best city, my block's the best block, and I'm going to ignore everything that's out there, and I'm just going to walk away. Bad trade. That was a bad trade. And that's kind of what God was trying to speak to us. But you know what it takes? It takes faith. It takes a lot of faith. This is why. This is the kind of the core reason why when you read the Bible, there's a verse that says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. That statement is not for us. That statement is a reflection of what you believe. Because if you had faith in who Jesus was and what he said and what he spoke and the perspective he shared, then you would say, give me the trade every single time. I'm optimizing my life for a different perspective than this one. And I'll take the trade every single time. Every time I can give, I'll take it. If Jesus put the opportunity in front of you to say, hey, go sell all that you got, give to the poor, come follow me. If he gave you that trade, you wouldn't even think twice if you had faith. Because you're like, whoa, you're telling me I can increase my bank account in heaven? Right? Where do I sign up? And it's that kind of faith that pleases God. That's the kind of faith that pleases God because it's a recognition that you believe who he is. It's a recognition that you believe there's a bank account in heaven. And you believe that there's treasure beyond this earth and this life and this moment. And you believe that he sees the bigger picture. That's an important part of the equation. I want to leave you with 3 kind of like practical thoughts, right, on how we can do this. Give a percentage of what you earn to God. Or to a cause that matters, or to things that are not for you, that are selfless, things that cause you to not benefit, things where you can help the poor, help the least. And it's important because it's important when you say you give a percentage. Because it's easy for us to say, hey, I'll give $50. I'll give $10. I'll give $100. And then suddenly, like 10 years from now, you're making 10 times what you make. And $10 is like, peanuts. Today, $10 might be like everything you got. But 10 years from now, $10 might be nothing. And so the way to challenge yourself in how you give is to say, I'm going to give a percentage. I'm gonna commit. I'm going to look at my life and I'm going to say, I'm going to commit to give a percentage. And this percentage, I'm going to use in whatever way God leads you to use it. It's about helping and blessing and doing this kingdom giving type thing, right? And so that's one way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it is say, hey, can I fund some mission critical things that need getting done here on earth? If you think about the least of these or the people that don't have enough, like maybe it's like, I don't know, I'm just going to make it up, like a playground, or maybe it's like a new nursery, or maybe it's like an education system, or maybe it's somebody needs groceries, or it could be a whole variety of things. And you just say, hey, there's a big thing. And I'm not talking about these little things. I'm talking about big things. God's blessed some people in the room, or will be blessing some people in the room, where you can do things that other people can't. And you have an opportunity to kind of share or invest or build up or kind of be a bricklayer for something that matters. And you could maybe look at life and look at situations and say, hey, I can meet a need. I see a need, I see an opportunity, and I could be the one to meet it. That could be the way that you do it. And there's another way altogether that has nothing to do with money. And it could be as simple as saying, hey, all of us have hours in the week, right? That's like, time is probably the most precious resource, because with money, you can always get it back. You can create some incredible scheme like, hey, you can make a Bored Ape and sell it as an NFT and make hundreds of thousands of dollars tomorrow if you're smart. You could do it. But what you can never do is get a second back. Every moment, every second, every minute that passes can never be got back. And one of maybe the most significant things you can do is say, hey, I got, 40, 80 hours in a week that I'm productive and not sleeping. And in that time, I can commit 5, 10, 6, 8, I don't know. I don't know what everyone's life situation is, but you can say I can commit time to serve in whatever capacity God feels He's leading you in, or you feel God's leading you in. You're drawn to some. A great way to think about this is like, what are you drawn to? In other words, what's your calling? What are these things that you feel nudges towards? It could be as simple as like sitting with somebody and listening to them talk over a coffee. It could be like serving in the church. It could be helping a family member. But the key part of it is you get nothing in return. We're always looking for like, how do we get something in return? Like, can I put this on my resume? Can I get volunteer hours for this? Are you going to pay me at the end of this? Can I post this on social media and tell everyone I'm #serving? Like, we're always looking for something back. But a great perspective to have is like, what can you give that nobody will ever know about? In another one of Jesus's like wisdom nuggets, he says, when you give, don't even let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Like, it's like, be like stealth mode on your giving. Like, it's like, hey, that thing got built. How did that happen? Nobody knows. But like, you're the person behind it. Like, those are the things that God cares about, because it's like, hey, those who are the greatest now will be least then, but those who are the least now, the ones who get the no recognition, the ones that don't have the accolades, the ones that don't have the follower counts, the ones that don't have the money, they're the greatest then. And if we just change the perspective of how we live life, then we'll find what it means to be rich. I guarantee you, when you're like 120 and you're sitting in some retirement home somewhere and you're like rocking on a chair and you think back on your life, you will be most happy if you were rich this way versus being rich the other way. And the amazing thing is you have your whole life in front of you. So you have the decision to make today on how you will live your life.